your son was the reason that you ended up building the largest Bitcoin mine in the world.
It was hard for me to transition from the Bitcoin industry to the enterprise industry because data center world does not like Bitcoin miners. I think the greatest thing Bitcoin did is it went into rural America. It transformed those communities.
In those early days, what were the biggest challenges that you came up against?
We had a margin call come in, I believe it was like $8 million. And let me tell you what we didn't have was $8 million. And we had 48 hours to come up with it.
Welcome back to Hosting Bitcoin, where we dig into the people, projects, and principles shaping the future of money, power, and possibility. Today's guest is a builder in every sense of the word, not just of businesses, but of infrastructure, conviction, and vision. Chad Everett Harris is a pioneering entrepreneur, creative strategist, and executive in the Bitcoin mining and enterprise data center space. From building one of the largest data centers in North America in Rockdale, Texas, to helping shape the future of digital infrastructure, Chad has been on the front lines of Bitcoin's physical backbone, where software meets steel and ideas become reality. But what sets Chad apart isn't just the scale of what he's built, it's the story. He's faced so many setbacks, reinventions, and real-world challenges that most people just wouldn't recover from, and he's still building, louder, clearer, and more purpose-driven than ever. Today, we're diving into mining, mindset, resilience, the superpowers that one gains from being a cyclist, and what it really means to bet on yourself in a world that doesn't always get the vision. Chad Everett Harris, it is an honor to have you on the show. Welcome to Hosting Bitcoin.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It's always exciting to talk to new people and share the latest and the greatest.
Well, I think we'll hit on quite a few things today, somewhere between cycling, Bitcoin, enterprise data centers. But we first had the chance to meet in Fort Lauderdale a couple weeks ago, and it was an absolute privilege to sit next to you and talk about Bitcoin mining and AI. What was that event like for you?
It's going to Bitcoin events today is just it's very, very interesting for me. I have a different opinion. I've always had a different opinion about Bitcoin. I've wasn't a Bitcoiner. I was the father of a Bitcoiner. That's the right way to say it. My youngest son was into Bitcoin. He's like, "Hey, let's mine Bitcoin." I'm like, "Whatever." And and that's where you kind of see the problem in any industry. You see a problem, and then you're like, "Oh, that's interesting now. I actually want to work on it." And that's kind of like the evolution. And I was there with the IntelliFlex guys. Chuck and I over the years have become friends. I really like his product. He and I are working on something together, and he's like, "Hey, I need you to come speak on our behalf." And I'm like, "You know me, like put a mic in my hand. Like you don't know what's coming out of my mouth, but put a mic in my hand and let's roll with it." And so it is fun. It's nice to see, like when I ran into the guys from Kanan, and like you see people that you saw on a regular basis, to see them again, it is quite interesting. And the industry has grown up a little bit. Maybe that's the right way to say it.
What are some things that have changed for you over the last few years in terms of how you see the industry?
I think the industry has a problem, and it's had the same problem from the very beginning. And one of the things that I always thought was interesting is that my youngest son, Ashton Harris, would always tell me, he would say, Bitcoin needs a product. It needs something that that can work, and people can say, "Oh, that's why it has value." Not that it's basically a operational battery at this point. Like the simplest way to describe to somebody is at the flip of a button, you can turn the thing off, turn it on, and monetize energy at its greatest value. It doesn't matter if it's for Bitcoin mining, it doesn't matter if it's for energy sales, curtailment, demand response, any of those things, or other purposes. And he would always say, something needs to be able to use Bitcoin. Like it needs to use Bitcoin. And I would always say, well, Google, when you upload data to your pay-per-click ads, Google, AdWords, they use the SHA-256 algorithm to upload the customer data to secure it. And I would say, we would talk about it like it needs something like that, that is transactional all the time, that people can rely on, because at some point you have to have a product. That's it. At some point you have to have a product. And where I think the greatest product is for this is to help the data center industry manage their power problem. And they have a real power problem. No one talks about it, but they have a real power problem. And their power problem isn't just that they need power, it's that these data centers, when you start talking about 100 megawatts, 200 megawatts, 500 megawatts, a gigawatt, then you start seeing crazy numbers like 8 gigawatts, 10 gigawatt locations. Like, who can write the better press release? Because like, because that's, I'm sorry, like, the very, very few people in 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 any industry have built 500, 700, 800, a gigawatt of power in a short window of time, and actually with something using it other than like a grid. And it's extremely challenging. And so, I, the data center industry needs somebody to help use their power while their facilities are being built. And how I moved out of the Bitcoin industry and into the enterprise industry, I was working on a project. I was able to secure a power plant that was on pallets in a warehouse. Like, it's the craziest notion in the world that you stumble across this. It's like, you walked into somebody's garage, you're like, hey, what's that thing over there? And they're like, oh, that's, a 500 megawatt power plant. They're like, gosh, can I load it in the car and like drive it down the street? And so as I like started working on this project with a developer, and then they would have a hyperscaler, they just were they said I said, hey, this plant's going to be built in 24 months. And their answer was, well, okay, we won't need the power for 5 years. I was like, I actually care less. I mean, when it's built, you got to pay. That's how the game works. And they're like, oh, you have to figure out something to do with the power. And I started scratching my head, and I was like, let me call Chuck over to IntelliFlex. Hey, Chuck, what if we had this thing, this mobile data center, Bitcoin mining, it didn't matter what it was, that just moved around as you built power plants? And that conversation went from Bitcoin mining and power plants, and then it got to, well, why don't we just build a product for that's specifically for data centers, that manages the ability to scale power and data at the same time? And so I think the Bitcoin industry, I think the small miners have the greatest opportunity to go into the marketplace and gather people, gather customers, and monetize their power while they're waiting, so they can secure it. They can start a load ramp, and then that load ramp solves the utility problem. It manages the loss of revenue or loss of cost of goods to the data center, or at least it minimizes it, and it helps the Bitcoin miner. It's a whole ecosystem all at the same time, crammed into one. And nobody's thinking like that because it's too complicated.
So this goes really well into the talks around Bitcoin as a pioneer species, or Bitcoin mining as a pioneer species, essentially preparing the ground for you to then have something else flourish in that same environment. And you also talked
Absolutely.
about, when we were on that panel together, even after the data center is built, not all of these applications are necessarily running all the time. That some of these, you mentioned a couple different products that only take maybe an hour a day, and the rest of the time that compute is idle.
It, you're correct. And so there are, that specific conversation you and I were talking about was a hedge fund. And so hedge funds are using either ML or AI for a very short window of time. They pay for the whole day, but it's a short window of time. They do all their new compute just before market opens. They update their model, and then it moves on. Well, here's the thing: there's like 20 hours in the day that it just sits there. And I think the problem that people have, or I think the way or did, let me let me back it up for a second. I think the correct way for somebody to be thinking about this from the developer side, not the Bitcoiner, is at some point they have to monetize the electricity and or at the lowest possible cost. So if power is, for sake of simple discussion, 10 cents, and a Bitcoin miner steps in and let's say says, "Hey, I'll take it for I'll pay you 4 cents and I'll give you, 10% of whatever I mine." And now the developer's like, "Well, now I only have a 6 cent cost of goods. So I reduced my losses by 40% during this time." And or the facility is in the same position, like, "Oh, hey, I can reduce my operational costs by 40% for 20 hours a day." And that turns into actual real money. At the end of the day, it becomes real. And that's the way a Bitcoin miner should be thinking about this. They shouldn't be, it should be different. It should be, I can come in and help reduce your cost of goods so that you are the most efficient, not I am going to come in and mine Bitcoin, and if it's not this power price, I'm not going to do it. Don't sell it from that angle. Sell it from an angle of I want to reduce your operational cost. Period.
And so that we can unpack the mechanics of this, essentially, if you're paying for power capacity at an enterprise level, even if you're only using a couple hours a day, you've got to secure the capacity for the whole day. Do I have that right?
You have to secure the capacity 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year.
So, why hasn't there been a solution to this? Is it just the margins are so good that whatever, we can waste 20 hours a day and the model still works? Or why do you think this isn't a problem that's top of mind in the enterprise data center world?
Well, the enterprise data or the data center world does not like Bitcoin miners. That's a simple component. The data center and enterprise industry thinks Bitcoin miners aren't data center operators. And while they don't operate to the standard that a data center, tier three, N plus one data center might operate, and their network might be different and their facility is different and it runs all those things, there is not a single data center operator that can move at the speed a Bitcoin miner can. And there's not a single data center operator that was forward thinking enough to say, "Hey, as we build these racks, maybe we ought to start thinking that the rack density is going to increase." Hey, maybe 4 years ago we should have been thinking about 100 kW racks, and 2 years ago 200 kW racks, and this year 500 kW racks, and then next year 800 kW racks, so that by the time the hardware met the density or the kilowatt density per rack, they would already have the infrastructure in place to handle that. Whereas today they don't have that situation in place. And I'm sure somebody's going to throw stones at me over what I just said, but the facts are the facts. And I've often said to, you know, and it was hard for me to transition from the Bitcoin industry to the enterprise industry because I've heard everything from "you're a crazy cowboy, you don't know what you're talking about," like everything you can imagine. And I would say, okay, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but in 2020, or 2019, when the plug was 1140 watts, and we were building at 3,000 watts. And then when the plug was 2,500 watts and we were building at 5,000 watts, we were smart enough, dumb Bitcoiners, were smart enough to go, "Hey, the hardware is changing at a pace of 6 months. We have to be forward thinking enough to at least a year so that the density or the plug capacity works." And I would, like, I joke, and one day one guy was like, "You know what, you're not wrong." And then as soon as I knew that that was the thing that I could harp on, or I could say, you weren't forward enough thinking, or you're not thinking about the future. You're only worrying about today. And the data center that's being built today, I don't care what anybody says, the data center that is under construction right this minute is not the data center of tomorrow. I've said it. I'll say it over and over again. They are not thinking far enough in advance. When Jensen comes out and says a 600 kW rack, I was in at the GTC, and Chuck from IntelliFlex was in another room. And right before he said it, I sent a text to Chuck, and I was like, "Hey Chuck, I think we should think about like 4,000 kW racks, like a 4 megawatt building. That's like 400 square feet. How much power can you put in the smallest possible space?" And he kind of joked, and then Jensen says that, and later I run into him, and he's like, I mean, we can do it. All it is power. And if you think like that, and what's been great about the Bitcoin industry is they're outsiders to the data center industry, and they can look at it and say, hey, I remember when we were doing interconnects. I remember when there was transmission problems. I remember when pad mount transformers were the problem. That's where I think the Bitcoin miner actually can transition their business, is to help move that along, because you know the Turner Constructions of the world, you know, David whipped the living crap out of Goliath. I mean, stomped him, and this is the prime opportunity to do the same thing. And and the public Bitcoin miners are moving at a pace that the same problem that you see with the public data centers, that's they're slow to move. They don't execute rapidly. They're not thinking. They're not like they're the core of that business is no longer what it used to be. The small miner, I don't care if it's 1 megawatt or 10 megawatts or 50 megawatts, that miner can make a decision on Tuesday and on Wednesday do something about it. And that is the difference. And as soon as the right opportunity comes along and the right person walks out and does it for the first time, everybody will follow.
Mm. You're speaking to, and it's so validating, exactly how we go and find sites and build them in our company is small sites distributed across the geographic region, available substation capacity, low competition, under 20 megawatts in most cases. And it's so easy to put them on quickly. And I saw a post from you recently that it'd be way easier for me to go put on 50, 20 megawatt sites than a gigawatt somewhere. I'd love for you
Absolutely.
to expand on why is that the case? Why is it so much easier to go and put the same amount of capacity in a distributed way together?
So it's interesting. Like when I made that post, it was real specific because I was on a call and somebody said, "Oh, well, why don't you just go build a gigawatt?" I was like, "Oh, well, let's walk through that process for a second." And I was like, "Oh, like, I mean, if you spend 5 minutes in the enterprise industry, you watch people whip out the word gigawatt, and I'm like, oh, well, so the transmission line is 345, so you're going to get some 345 transformers. You're going to step them down, and then you're going to step it down to another set of transformers that'll then go on from there. Well, those 345 transformers, I bet you they take 18 months to get today. Oh, and by the way, that's a lot of work. Whereas the statement you just made, hey, if I go and find 50 locations that have 20 megawatts, or actually 19.9, that's the key, it's 19.9. So if I go find that 19.9 50 times, I can spin that up like nonstop. It's not hard to do. It doesn't require a lot of equipment. And if you think about it, like if you, from a modular standpoint, if you just skip buildings, you went from a modular standpoint and you start thinking about it and you're like, hey, in 700 or 800 square feet, you can put 6 megawatts of power. So you're like, hey, I need 2,000 square feet and some, and that's it. And you can do that over and over and over and over again. So it's not a land acquisition problem. It's not, the only challenge that you run into, well, for Bitcoin mining, you could do Starlink, but from a data center side, you just have to make sure that you have a solid bundle of dark fiber laying around, and you can find it. If there's a substation, there's fiber there. And that's the key. And I would bet all the king's gold that Shadow, my dog, a pickup truck, and a shovel, we could go beat whomever is building a gigawatt somewhere. And I'd let Shadow do all the work, right? I'd put him in charge. I'd just sit in the car all day long, and we'd switch roles. But it really is. I mean, it is that simple, and I think people overcomplicate it.
It's so reminiscent of Bitcoin coming on the scene as an outsider to the financial system, and for years and years totally written off by the legacy financial world as you don't understand what you're doing. You're absolutely not going to have a chance of competing with the likes of fiat currencies and all of the store value in the world. Like, cool technology, but good try. Go play in your own little corner. And what you mentioned a couple minutes ago about not really being accepted into the data center industry, and yet still being right just a couple years early in terms of density. It seems to be this pattern of people who are in technologies who are outside of the bounds of what we typically accept as normal and the way that things work are the most well positioned to find a new, interesting, and often way better way to use the existing resources that we have available.
That is worth that statement you just made is worth everything, and it's interesting because I now believe that people are starting to change their minds. I now believe that people are starting to change their minds, and it's not because somebody has done something. It's because an enterprise business or a utility, provider has said, "Hey, hold on for a second." Like you read a press release and a utility provider is, oh, we're going to build capacity and there's a data center that's going to take it. And, 8 years from today. And if you have a crystal ball in front of you, you would know that data center, probably its footprint, there's like, oh, it's going to be 4 million square feet. You're like, nah, it's probably going to be 400,000 square feet. If it was 4 million, it's probably going to be 400, and it's probably way more denser. And it's going to be something that nobody has seen. If we're talking 8 years from today, it's not the same. It's not the same animal. And that is what I think has changed is people now, you know, I think I joke when I say this, I think regular people now, I use the word regular, non-technical people are now interacting with AI on a daily basis. Everyone's using some type of, interaction with, whether it's a chat GPT or whomever, and they're starting to learn how to use things. And I often talk to people and I say, oh, it's not going to replace your job. It's going to replace your waste. And they always say, what do you mean by waste? And I'm like, the stupid emails that you have to respond to, the dumb calendar event, like all these things that require like a click and a thing, and you have to do something about it. And if you think about the greatest thing we can do for our society as a whole to grow is is for us to stop doing things that are repetitive and wasteful of your time, and let your brain have a second to think about the next great thing. And it's the next great thing that your brain will come up with when you're not busy, trying to organize some calendar, when you're not busy trying to make some reservation, when you're not busy trying to figure out how to respond to, an RFP that you there's something in there that you don't know. And having tools that can help you do that is the solution. And that's why I say AI isn't going to replace your job. It's going to replace the dumb things in your job. And I think the data center industry if people play it correctly, there is an entire wave of jobs waiting, desperately waiting. If there's someone on LinkedIn, Andy Davis, if you follow him, from he is he has done an incredible job. He started doing recruiting, and I remember I was on one of his podcasts, and we joked about it because he's into the hundred thousands followers, or like I think his email gets a ridiculous engagement, and he often says, hey, we need people in the data center industry. Not we need non-technical, technical people that want to learn to be technical, like every component there is. And if you just start looking at how, in Texas, the Bitcoin industry came in and went to rural communities, you know, Core Scientific, Windstone, when we went to Rockdale, Clean Spark, Marathon, like all these companies that were large companies went in these small communities, created jobs for people that, I remember one of the guys that we hired, Ed Beal. Ed Beal got hired because I pulled up to a Ford dealership, and I didn't know you had to have two license plates. We had just gotten to Texas from Louisiana, and like Lyle and I went to go get licensed, changed like everything over, and like, hey, you need two license plates. And I look at the truck, I'm like, there's no place to put it. Went to the Ford dealership. He goes and gets tools. He's like drilling on the. I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, you need the license plate installed." I was like, "Hey, how much do you make an hour?" Yeah, you just want to quit and come. Like, I don't know what you would do, but you went and got tools and figured this out. Like, just come work for us. And I know he's still there because he sends me texts every once in a while. But that's what happened. Is an outside industry that everyone frowned on came into rural America, all over Montana, Wyoming, Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, like all these states, and created workforces and hired people that would never in their minds believe they would be working on something technical. And you know what? Those company team members across the United States flourished. And if that is not some of the great, I think that's the greatest thing that Bitcoin did. I think the greatest thing Bitcoin did is it went into rural America. It transformed those communities. It created synergistic sales tax. It promoted continued education. It took kids in high school that weren't going on to college and gave them opportunities. And it just transformed rural America. And it's if there's anything the Bitcoin industry should be proud of, it's that. That is the number one thing, is what it did for communities all across the United States. And I think it's the greatest thing.
And at one point, you were an outsider too. I mean, this
I was a
wasn't, you
real
didn't do this
outsider.
forever.
Correct. Correct.
Um,
I was an
I would
absolute
love,
outsider.
I would love to hear how you were first exposed to this. It seems like your son was the reason that you ended up building the largest Bitcoin mine in the world. And that's kind of, it's hard to not dig deeper into that headline.
It's, Ashton, super smart young kid when he was, I want to say when he was like 8, we were at a La Madeline, and he had like hacked the Wi-Fi so he could play his Game Boy. And it knocked out the cash registers. And I'm like, hey, we got to go. Like, we got to go. They're going to figure this out. Like, stop what you did. We got to go. And, and it's just, it was just, that's just what it was. And so he, he introduced me to it in maybe 2012. And I was like, you've lost your mind. Like, you've lost your mind. Get out of here with that nonsense. And he goes off to college, and his brothers, he and his brother are off at college. And he comes home and he's like, hey, I want to mine Bitcoin. I was like, okay, well, help me understand. Like, I'm happy to help you. Like, this is the thing that you want to do. And, and it was, I just saw that it had problems of like trying to build it. And that was the thing that was interesting was, I didn't know how it worked. I understood how it worked, but I didn't know anything about it other than it was loud and it was hot. Those are the two things, loud and hot. And how do you solve that problem? And so when you realize that your 12-year-old son is going to the local convenience store in the hood, buying money orders with, getting a money order, sending money to, like, I don't know, I think it was Romania. I don't know where we were sending it to get Bitcoin. And then, he would buy stuff online. He thought it was really cool. He was like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I buy it online. That's really neat. And I was like, okay, well, that's okay. I get it. And then I remember he had an Audi S4 when he was 16, and he bought like a tune from somebody in the Dominican Republic. And it was funny because I want to say that he said it was like $800 when he did it, and it was Bitcoin. And later, Bitcoin goes up, and he's like, yeah, I think I could have bought like eight of those cars for what happened at that time. And you just, and it was always kind of fun and interesting. And I ended up in Rockdale, Texas, because the client the client that the company had, that they're going to build this facility for, they're like, hey, we need you to come. We need you to come help. Like, we need you to come. Like, if you're coming, like, we're in for it. And at the time I was like, look, I got nothing but time, and I'm looking for a great adventure. And so it was a lot of fun to go build a company with your youngest son and three friends or two other friends, and you know wild stuff. I think probably, and I was reminded of this the other day, like teaching Irene from Bitmain how to shoot a gun. Like, when I said that to somebody, like, yeah, I think we taught Irene how to shoot a gun. And it's those kind of stories that when you kind of look back at it, it was a great time, and it was a lot of fun, and it'll never be like that again. That's the sad part. That was when the industry was, nobody had any idea. When we started saying we're going to put 100 megawatts in a single building, and it's going to be 1,000 feet long, people are like, no, 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 you can't do more than 10. And they're only supposed to be 16 feet tall, and they're only supposed to be, we're like, yeah, like, look, that isn't going to work for us. And that'll never be that way again. And that's why I think the Bitcoin miner today that's agile, has the ability to move and think differently, has a great opportunity to go monetize power in the data center industry. It's just going to take somebody with some smarts to sell it. It's not going to be me. It's not going to be me.
Bitcoin mining allows you to acquire Bitcoin at a lower cost than buying Bitcoin outright and produces consistent results. At Abundant Minds, we take care of setup, maintenance, and performance so that your miners can run efficiently. It's a straightforward way to grow your Bitcoin stack without the guesswork. Book a call to start now. What, in those early days, what were the biggest challenges that you came up against?
Probably the most stressful challenge ever. And the most stressful challenge that I personally ever came across was, I handled the power side. And I remember John Bick from Priority Power, like, we have the contract, we're going to sign it. And he says to me, he's like, hey, this contract has the potential of having a margin call. And I was like, okay, well, let's talk to TSU about it. TSU's like, oh yeah, no, no, like, you shouldn't expect that. 30 days from the day signing that contract, and I only think during that time we had like 15 megawatts on. We had a margin call come in, when I tell you, took the breath out of me. If I remember correctly, it was like $8 million. And let me tell you, what we didn't have was $8 million. And we had 48 hours to come up with it. And I remember John calling me, and he's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, John, I was like, I have 47 hours and 38 minutes left to figure it out. I got other problems at this moment. But every single Monday, I would get an email that said either I had to pay or I would get. That was probably the hardest thing to manage because we did not have the capital to support it. The only other thing that I would say was um, there was challenging times with equipment. It's just, whether it was transformers, wire, lugs, right? Lugs for transformers, things that you would never think of. And and when you need, when you're building one building, it's one thing. When you're building three buildings and you're like, oh, well, okay, so there's, 100 pad mount transformers. Okay, you need, a bazillion miles of cable. And and so back then, we were smart enough to go and convince the wire manufacturers to sell to us direct. I mean, we did really, really unique things. We figured out ways to buy stuff, and and then we were really good about paying our bills. So then all of our vendor partners would allow us to sign for just about anything. Like I think the day that we decided to buy 1.5 gigawatts worth of substation transformers, and the group selling it was like, just sign them, and I was like, perfect, and we'll have some payment structure and we'll start giving you deposits. And that probably was really, like, looking back, it was great foresight, because those we were buying those transformers. For simple discussion, let's say they were $1 million, and I think like a year later, those same transformers were worth like $1.5 million. So it didn't matter. Like, you at least reduced your cost. And our strategic plan. It was kind of funny that I remember Lyle, David, Ashton, and I sitting in our kitchen because we all lived together. And they're like, hey, what happens when you got to pay for that stuff and we don't have any place for it to go? And I was like, well, we could sell it. And if we sell it, we could probably at least keep half or a third of it and sell it off. And then it costs us no money. And so we always were thinking that way because we never knew at the end of the day what ultimately was going to happen. Is that when the original company that started in Meadowood, Louisiana was sold to the Germans in Northern Data or Northern Bitcoin, we never knew like what their plan was. Our plan was, hey, four guys in Texas that all live together having the time of their life, right? And it was like, hey, we just want to build cool stuff, do fun things, and life will work itself out. And so it was a great adventure. That's the right way to say it. It was a great adventure.
When you talk about $8 million margin calls and $1 million pieces of equipment that you don't know what to do with, I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this kind of fear of really going big like that. And one of my great coaches said, if you want to be more successful, you should keep on wishing for bigger and bigger problems to make themselves known to you.
I could not. That is the greatest advice in the world. The greatest thing you can do for yourself is risk it all, because at the end of the day, you can start over, right? Like, as long as you don't kill yourself in the process, right? Like, as long as you don't cause yourself harm in the process. And I think that's an important thing because, in the enterprise world, the only thing capital people talk about is like, oh, how's that de-risked? How are we covering this risk? I'm like, we're not. We're entrepreneurs. They're like, no, 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 no. Like, what's like, that won't work for us. And I'm like, but that's why you have to change your thinking. Like, you have to change your thinking because great things happen when you're taking the greatest risk. And sometimes it's not even what you're working on, it's something completely different. And I think that's the right way to think about it.
What do you think keeps people playing small?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is capital. Capital is very, that it's, you know, I spent all last summer and I knocked on 105. I think I went and counted 105 different groups around the country. And I think I was told no like 115 times because some of the same people told me no more than once. And it's interesting and it's really humbling You come in, you have a great idea. They're like, the idea is awesome. I really like it. Blah, 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 blah. Do you have a customer? And you're like, no, no, no customer is going to buy this idea until it's built. They're like, nah, come and see us when you have a customer. And and so you hear it so many times that you have to teach yourself not to listen to it. And eventually, you convince somebody that your idea is a real idea. And along the way, that idea, as long as you stay committed, and it's no different than what how you were saying, you find these small locations and you execute on them, and then that's your strategy. Well, how many times along the way did you feel like your legs were cut out? How many times along the way did whatever the scenario was not work? Every time. How many times did the original plan end up being the final plan? Never. And I think, and like, never. And I mean, anybody that thinks it's going to go as planned, and you'll laugh because we're going to talk for a second about bicycles, right? And so
I was hoping
I'm
so.
yeah, I'm crazy passionate about riding a bicycle, and mostly it's how I solve all the problems in my head, right? I'm thinking about all the things, and it's I go off on my bike and there's nobody, and I turn my phone off, and it just works itself out by the time I come back. Well, when my I would always say, like, if you're going to invest in an idea that I present to you, you should just look at my cycling data. And so, as an example, for the last 7 days, I've ridden 406 miles in 21 hours and some change. And and the previous 7 days from yet, like that's a lot on a bicycle. 21 hours on a bicycle is a lot of time. What's really unique about it is that 7 days, everything was perfect. There was never, not one thing didn't do what it was supposed to do. And about 2 months ago, I say I'm working towards, there's a bicycle race in Steamboat. I'm only training for it. It's a thing of mine that I wanted to do last year and I didn't, because I was looking for money, and I wish I would have put that as a priority, and I didn't. Right. And here's a little lesson that I learned. Like, I decided that, oh no, I'm going to raise this money. I'm going to stay at it until it happens. And then I didn't go do something that would have been better for me mentally. And so this year I'm like, I don't care what happens. I'm moving to Colorado for a month. Like, that's where I'll be. I could care less. Well, 2 months ago, I entered my first bicycle race of the year, and I showed up. Nothing was going right. My computer crashes, and now with all the data, you know how many watts you're pedaling, your heart rate, all these things. And I sit at the start line for 6 minutes trying to fix it. Everybody has ridden off. And I'm like, okay, I'm calculating in my head. I was like, okay, there's a neutral zone. It's 10 miles long. Okay, if I leave, I have to leave at 6 minutes. If at 6 minutes, I think I can catch them. And so, like, literally, I set my stopwatch in like 6 minutes. I was like, screw it. And I left, and I caught the pack right as they left the neutral zone. And about an hour later, I kept asking people, like, hey, like, how many miles are we at? Like, nobody's telling me. And I was like, okay, I see how it's going to be. It was like, they're like, why do you need to know? I was like, I don't have a computer. They're like, oh, yeah, we're not telling you anything. And about 15 minutes later, I was like, you know what? I am bored out of my mind. And I rolled off the front and I said, you guys are never going to see me again. And that day, when everything was going wrong, I was losing my mind. I came in fourth. And it's like the greatest thing to think of when everything is going wrong. Are you the person that's like, okay, I give up? Or are you the person that, hey, my business plan is supposed to turn left, and now I have to make a U turn and go through a corkscrew to go right? Like, are you the person that can manage that process? Because that is, like, investors look at that. Are you, when the things are the most difficult, are you a person that was like, oh, you need a list of The impossible completed, got it. Like if you, no matter how difficult of a problem they present to you, you say, no problem, I will go do it. And then you go figure it out because nobody that is going to give you money that trusts you will ever want to hear, oh, I don't know if I can do that, because they're not investing in a person that is saying, oh, no, I don't think I can do that. They're investing in a person that says, oh, that's the only problem. Like, let me go drive a tank through that building. I'll be back in 5 minutes. And that really is it. I mean, I would encourage every single person that is thinking about raising money, changing their business, running their business, growing their business. I don't care if it's a convenience store. Work on your personal brand so when somebody goes to find out about you, they can look up on your personal brand and they see you chopping a tree down with a plastic butter knife and not giving up. Because that's the greatest it's the greatest thing you can do for yourself is that you can help educate people about your personality prior to them ever meeting you. And it really is like, just be genuine. Like if you're just a jerk, just be a jerk all the time. You don't have to pretend. It's okay. Like people don't have to like you, you know? And like one of my favorite sayings, like, I have a few of them, but one of my favorite sayings is when someone really wants to like argue a point with me and I know, like, it's not like, oh, I'm just digging in because like why I actually know I have like the piece of paper that says, here's the code to the key, to the box. I would say, oh, well, don't worry. The future will give us the answer. And it infuriates them because I'm like, I don't need to argue with you about this. The future will actually tell us which one of us is right or wrong. And if you can, have the emotional intelligence not to let people set you off, provide them with an escape, set them up for failure when you need to, and don't ever, 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 ever let somebody think that you're unwilling to skin yourself alive to succeed. You're like, oh my God, he just said skin yourself alive. I haven't thought about that one yet.
There's 15 different things that I could pull the thread on, but I want to go deeper into the cycling because I think that almost every high performer that I've ever met has this place that's essentially like church for them, where they, whether it's meditating or cycling or running or going to the gym, there's this quiet place that you unlock something. And I want to know for you, why is it cycling? And give me the bullish case for why cycling is the best performance unlock for someone who's trying
No,
to find their thing.
there is no doubt. It is absolutely the hardest thing that you will do if you do it to succeed. And I'm not talking about going and ride your bike. Like, oh hey, let's go for a bike ride. I perform the best mentally when I am suffering. I mean, suffering 1,000 deaths. And I know it sounds funny. And like this morning, I was doing, four 20-minute intervals inside of a 60-mile ride, and I was suffering 1,000 deaths each time. And heart rate screaming, legs are on fire. I had 80 opportunities to quit, 80 of them. Every minute I could have quit, but it's the unwillingness to allow myself that type of rule, like to quit. And what makes cycling such a difficult sport, and I know that like runners will say, oh no, or like a CrossFitter will say, oh no, it's mine. And I agree, like box jumping on 36-inch boxes 1,000 times is hard. It's really hard. But to go fast on a bicycle, you have to train 10, 15, 20 hours a week, and over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and that doesn't go away. And I've been riding a bike for since I was like in my teens, and I like it because it is a 100% you. It is a 100% you sport. And I found that if I didn't ride with people and I could get fast, and that's what made it fun for me. And maybe it was last week. I was running my Insta 360 X4, because I love to record stuff. There's funny things happen with me on a bicycle, and I turned around. There's a at the lake, at the lake on Tuesdays. There's like a
Mhm.
group race or something. And I turned around because I wanted to use them to get me to the other side of the lake quickly. And I noticed that like nobody was pulling, so I went to the front. I was like, "Oh, come on, guys!" Like, and I just dropped the hammer because it's into the wind, and then we're flying. And I noticed like they're not behind me, and it's funny because then I run into, I don't know a lot of people in Dallas, but I run into this guy AJ, and he starts telling me, he's like, "Yeah," they're like, "Who is that guy? Where did he come from? And was he on an e-bike?" And AJ goes, "No, no, no, that's just Chad. Like he trains by himself. And I promise you," he goes, "I rode behind him for 2 hours the other day. It's the fastest I've ever ridden. And I got 36 PRs around Dallas just sitting behind him." And it really is, it's just something, I don't know. It's like, I think I've got mental problems. It's like something that goes off in my head, and like I shut everything off, and I like turn into like a little zone. And I think people, I think, I think highly competitive entrepreneurs, and I don't mean an entrepreneur that's like, "Oh, I have to do better than him." I mean, highly competitive entrepreneurs that hold themselves accountable, that they are their worst competitor. I always say, I am my worst competitor. I will fight myself to the death. And even at work, like doing work, same thing. I have a high set of expectations. When I don't achieve it, I take myself to HR and write myself up, you know. And it's funny because I think entrepreneurs that are in a different world. They have guys that start businesses that are entrepreneurs, and they rinse, repeat, sell them, rinse, repeat, sell them. And then I think there's a group that are are searching or trying to change how things work. And those are the guys that are dangerous, because they'll take a risk. They'll risk everything. They're worse than going to the casino. They'll risk everything because they believe in themselves so much.
I think you're a prime example of how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as I was doing the research prep and just scrolling through your recent posts, I saw you wading through what looked like essentially a waist deep lake on one of your bike rides.
Yes. Yeah, I was
And
pissed.
like I would have 100% just turned around and stayed dry and taken my bike back home. And this
Yeah,
guy
no.
decided to turn it into a swim.
Hey, well, kind of. So when I say the reason why I record so much stuff is because really, like, funny things happen, and I never know what I'm gonna say. That's like when I tell people I record stuff, and they're like, "Oh, why? Like you like write down what you're recording?" Like, no, actually, no. I'll just be recording. And like if you saw one of the posts, there's one where like I was riding, I was like, oh look, Mr. Sun. Hey, I saw a moon just a little while ago because I'd been out since like 3 in the morning. And it is that kind of, that's my personal brand. Like like what you see is what you get, and I think it is interesting. Yeah. Wading through the water was definitely like, I was like, you got to be kidding me. I tried to ride through it, right? I tried to ride through it because I know it's a sidewalk that I ride on all the time. But I was like, okay, am I on the sidewalk? So that's when I started walking because I was riding at first. And I was like, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. But like today was horrible. It was like 40-mile-an-hour winds out there. Like it's like 45-degree angle riding. You're like, it's gonna slack up here in a minute.
What motivated you, or what was the shift that made you invest in a personal brand? Because that's a relatively recent thing for me as well, is recognizing how much of a difference that makes in people wanting to work with you, the amount of trust that people have for you, and just demonstrating what it's like to get to know you. What kind of triggered you seeing the value in sharing yourself with the world in that way?
Well, that might be the greatest question of this entire interview today. And I encourage every single person that listens to this, sit down and think about how you can communicate who you are to people that will never meet you or may have not met you but will. And the key reason why I did it, I needed to solve the problem of he's just a Bitcoin guy.
Hmm.
And so when, and I recognized it when I was at one of the large private equity firms in New York, and actually somebody said it. It's like, yeah, you're just one of those Bitcoin guys. And I was like, actually, I'm far more than that. And so I stopped for a second and I thought to myself, I was like, okay, you you know, 20 years ago, like maybe it's 15 years ago, I made a video um, because I was pissed off at American Express about the Small Business Saturday, right? It was the first year they had it, Small Business Saturday. I get them, I open it up in a retail store that I had. I'm looking at the mail and I said, yeah, get everybody that works here and get them inside right now. They had no idea what I was going to do. I lined everybody up and I just said, somebody get a camera, let's start recording. And I introduced everyone and I was like, hey, small business should be every day, not just Saturday, like it was, and it was like November 24th because it was my birthday. And so I put this on, Facebook and had, I don't know, 2 million views. And, that's way back before, like that was a thing. And it's funny that I walked around the city of New Orleans and people would be like, hey, you're the guy from the video. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, are you shopping at small businesses this week? Because you need to do it every day. Those are the people that drive the community. And so when I started having this, like, oh, you're a Bitcoin guy, I was like, man, how can I go? What's the fastest way for me to solve that? And I just grabbed my phone and I was like, I'm just going to start sharing what I do on a regular basis that I'm passionate about, that's easy for me to do. And interesting enough, 2 years later, I go, when I meet people, they're like, oh, hey, I see you ride a bicycle, or oh, hey, your dog's Shadow. Oh, hey, I saw that you went to Nashville. Oh, I saw you were in Virginia. Oh, I heard you're taking a trip to Colorado. Oh, and it's my way of getting them to know actually who I am, not necessarily what it is that I'm talking to them about. And it is the greatest like opener. Once they know you, that you can get way past. I actually used it. I used it with um I used it with a place that I booked in Virginia that I couldn't go to, and they're like, "Oh, well, you can rebook it in 60 days, or we'll keep your deposit." And I was like, "Well, I'm not coming there till October, and I mean, I have a planned trip in October. Like, just don't make me come there. Let me use it in October." And I said, "Here, let me give you a link to my trip in Nashville at the Thompson. Like, here's the link. You go look." And it's, Shadow in an elevator at, 1 o'clock in the morning with like, 10 girls around him. And then he's like in the lobby and like, he would go for an hour a day in the lobby and people would just be all crowded around him. And I'm like, hey, that's what you get when I come. I'm not asking for anything. That's what you get. And by having that kind of content out there, it really changes people's perception and allows you to say, hey, this is who I am. You might want to do business with me. And if you like who I am personally, you'll like who I am professionally.
It's so interesting. I personally went years and years without doing anything on social media. And it's this double edged sword, right? If you're on the consumption side, it can be such a drain on your energy and resources. And on the flip side, if you can be a creator and share yourself, it's not only, as you just said, a very powerful tool in networking, getting people to know you, getting yourself out there, having people want to work with you. It's also, I've found, extremely helpful in personal growth. I mean, one of the most significant trials by fire is to just share who you are in that moment, knowing that it's going
Oh,
to live there
boy,
forever.
is it ever. It is. I mean, like, and I'm sure you do it. You record stuff and you look at it and go, God, really? Should I? And I have got a rule. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like, I just post it, like it or not. Like, that's what it is. And there's even, I'm a big advocate of not editing. I'll edit what my idea is, but I don't edit like like there's a video on TikTok that I posted at 11 o'clock last night. There's but a minute into it, all of a sudden I was like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say right now. And then I like moved on from it. But it's like I had a brain freeze, and I think, my position is that if you just let people see that, they're like, oh, you're a real person. Like, oh, you're a real person like me. And I think that's actually um, I think what a personal brand does for you is that if you are engaging with the right people at the right time in your life, like the season in your life, because life has seasons, and they see something in you that they saw, somewhere in the world, and they're like, oh, he's like me. And I mean, it happened yesterday. I was walking through with a potential hire for this new business, and he tells us, he's like, oh man, I had a long night. My friends in town. It's like I had too much to drink. I was gonna get up and go to the gym. And he's telling me all about this. I was like, oh, you're like me. You're a regular guy. I said it just like that. He's like, yeah, I'm regular. I was like, yeah, because it's like no regular people talk like that. Like, God, like what was I thinking? We were just having a casual conversation. I was like, I think that's important in this world. Like, everything isn't perfectly staged in life. It's not the perfect press release that has the right sentence with the comma, and then the period, and the explanation point, and it's like the world doesn't work like that. And I think we might be getting back to reality. I'm hoping we're getting back to reality because Instagram is fake. Like that world is just fake. It doesn't exist. And I keep trying to tell people, it's like, hey, that perfect video where everything looks absolutely amazing. Yeah, that's fantasy land. Like let's shoot that video with that person at like 6 in the morning. Let's see what that looks like. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to remember as we try and grow our businesses, that don't chase after someone else's someone else's idea. Create your own product, service, business, and grow it based on your vision and goals. And don't allow people to influence your direction, because that is a surefire recipe for disaster.
So there's been a joke that you've repeated that you're going from the Giga Chad phase of your life to the
Yeah.
Enterprise Chad phase of life. And you
Enterprise
talked about
chat is
seasons of
real.
life. What do you characterize as your current season?
I have moved from the Bitcoin industry into the enterprise industry. And it's real easy for me because it requires somebody that can communicate, can write, can communicate with all different types of groups, trades, from trades to the C-suite office to everybody in between, and creating a product for a variety of end users. And it works really well for me because I understand it. But the enterprise side is so I've developed with a team a company that delivers rapid deployed data centers, full package of managed services, the facility itself, hardware integration, aftercare, on premise, at utilities across the country. And the greatest part about the whole thing is the one of the partners in it is Chuck from IntelliFlex. And what's even greater than Chuck being a partner in it, because Chuck's a brilliant guy, super fun, is that Chuck did exactly what an entrepreneur is supposed to do. Is is I had created a roadmap of growth. I was like, it's like 5 locations, and one of them was on this deck that I gave him one day at DFW, and it said DFW Customer Experience Center, and it was funny. So I was thinking of the day after the tariffs were announced for Canada, that Chuck calls up and he's like, "Hey, I think we have to do something about that Customer Experience Center." And I was like, "Yeah, I agree." I tell you, in 36 hours, Chuck and his team were on the ground in DFW. I mean, literally, it was that quick, and and that's what an entrepreneur is. And so, if you think about this business and you say, we have created the greatest story ever. We A group of people that are all entrepreneurs got together. They have created a data center that's delivered and goes live in under 10 months, solves the bottleneck problem in the industry, manages, can stack on, take away, its capacity can grow very interestingly. And we did exactly what our own government asked us to do: manufacture in the United States, create jobs in the United States, and support your community. DFW, jobs, job training. There's a trade school down the road. Like every possible thing that we as citizens of this great country have been asked to do, like we orchestrated, put it together in lightning speed. And that is what makes it exciting. Is Chuck is really, he's actually, Chuck is next level crazy when it comes to how detail oriented he is. He makes me nervous. He's so detail oriented. I mean, we were in the facility and he was walking around. I was like, hey, you you thought that you're down to like inches. You're in like 170,000 square foot building. It's like, oh, this 1 inch is where this bolt's going to go. And it's and if you go into his product, go into the Teleflex product, now you understand why it can be spun up, delivered, installed, and operational so quickly, because of how detail oriented he is and his thought process and his manufacturing facility in Canada. You can eat off the floor. I've never seen a place like it. I was so scared when I was in there. I was like, can we just got to stay on the yellow line? Can we walk outside of that? I don't want to get anything dirty. And it's funny, but it attests to an outsider. So Chuck was an outsider, same similar outsider, designing a product because somebody asked him to, and then was like, well, I can do better than this. Oh, I can do better than this. Oh, I can do better than this. Oh, I can do better than this. And so that really is, you know, how all of this comes together. The whole enterprise side for me, as I was saying about the power plant and working with a hyperscaler and one of the largest developers in the country, that's where I figured it out. When they said, we need power, but we don't want to pay for it for years. That's when I was like, no, no, that's not going to work. That's when my brain just started turning on and said, hey, we can solve the problem in the middle, and we can do it faster than anyone. We can behave that way, and then we can grow and scale it. And that's kind of why I say I can build 50 of those faster, 50 20s faster than you can build a gigawatt. I know it. I guarantee, hands down, beat them to the finish line every time.
What excites you most about the next couple of years of what you're working on and just how it's going to play out in the industry as a whole?
I am the most interested in solving the problem for enterprise businesses. And and I don't yet think that we don't have the product for it, but my thought process is that XYZ123 company has a problem that they need to solve. And and like George Jetson pulls up sets in their parking lot, runs their little system, fixes it, and then George Jetson leaves. And I think that is the future business, is being able to locate capacity anywhere, anytime when someone needs it. And coming with backup power, any configuration there is, I think that is really interesting. Um, and I think that I personally have enjoyed creating the automation and the AI agents and an entire team of people I call by name that are all AI. I mean, I've created an entire like Chad Harris, I call them Chad Harris agents, right? There's a whole bunch of them. And I've been working on them for a long time. And I see how efficient I can be. And, to ride a bicycle 20 hours, and that's kind of funny, to ride a bicycle 20 hours a week, you need 20 hours a week just to be able to ride 20 hours a week because there's stretching and all these other things you got to do. So you're like 40 hours, like that's a full-time job. Well, so what I did is I created an entire team that do the repetitive, foolish work that I shouldn't be wasting my time on. And it's interesting. And I think that is a fun, it's fun, right? Right now it's fun. They'll probably, fire me at some point, right? They'll probably, those little AI agents probably get rid of me and say, hey, listen, we're taking your comp and walking out the door. You don't get it anymore. Um, but I think that's a really neat part. And I can't wait to see how fast our industry changes. Because this industry, if you think the last, do you think the last 12 months has been wild? The next 36 months, I don't think any of us can imagine what's coming. I have an idea, but I have a crazy imagination.
Chad, I want to thank you for taking time to sit with me, speak to my audience, share a ton of wisdom and experience, as well as, in my opinion, one of the most forward thinking visions of how not only the Bitcoin mining industry, but how the enterprise data center industry can function in the future. And just want to give you a moment to share where people can find you, what you're working on that you want them to follow along with, and any final thoughts that you feel like didn't quite make it out.
No, I mean, I listen. I when you asked, I felt bad because I didn't immediately respond to the email. Not because I didn't want to, because I just didn't. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to get to it, and and I appreciate it, and it's interesting. I I saw in you how I think. And it was when we were chatting, I saw in you, like when I was talking to you, I saw in you how I think. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I'll talk to Bo because he's thinking differently. And I appreciate somebody that does that. And honestly, if somebody wants to find me, it's really simple. The smartest, greatest, best way, you can do one or two things. You can go to LinkedIn. It's Chad Everett Harris. You can't miss it. Or you can do it even simpler, Chad at Harris.energy. I can't. That's an easy one too. But you're gonna see soon. You're gonna see soon what, and I don't want to say the name yet, only because like I have a whole little strategy behind it. But I truly appreciate you taking the time. I love this kind of platform, and thank you for just letting me run wild with my crazy ideas. I really have enjoyed it.
Thank you, Chad. It's a privilege to get to talk to you, and not many people, especially people in our industry, get to talk to the person who built the largest facility in the world, still the largest facility in the world today, even years later. So, really excited that that was just the beginning and is kind of like old hat to you, and you're off to something even more interesting now.
Yeah, it'll be exciting, and I still have a lot of pride about Rockdale, Texas, and the people that work there, and how I would my closing thoughts would be I hope that as industry changes in the future, that some of the examples that a small team that showed up in the middle of nowhere with a big pen and a roll of duct tape and four pickup trucks and six dogs transformed a small rural town. I hope that other people, just a smidgen of that, gets into somebody's veins and other places do that because I think that's what it's all about. It's like changing people's lives, and I really have enjoyed it.
Love that. Beautiful place to end. And with any luck and so far a couple of years of work under our belts, Abundant Minds is picking up your torch and doing that for the Pacific Northwest.
That's exactly that's all you have to do is that, and I think that's awesome.
Chad, thank you so much for this and hope to have you back
Absolutely,
on, especially with a world that changes so quickly.
absolutely, anytime, anytime.
Sounds good. Until next time, thanks for listening.